Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is a 10-minute Bible Hour podcast, and we are inching our way toward getting into the actual text of the book of Esther. But first, we've been getting a sense of the lay of the land of this significant era of turmoil and transition that runs from the late 600s BC up to the time of Cyrus the Great and his conquest of Babylon in 539 BC. So much happens in there. So much changes in that roughly 70-year window. And it raised massive theological questions for God's chosen people and about the redemptive plan in general and about what God was doing and how this was all going to work out. This is a huge pivotal period, not just historically, but also theologically. And now that we've looked pretty closely at this historical era, there's a bunch of stuff in the Old Testament, particularly the prophets, that we started looking at yesterday and that we're going to look at more today that I think is going to pay off and help us feel this whole historical, theological moment that is building up to the book of Esther that much better. So I'm going to ask my good friend Jeffrey to play some catchy music right here, and then we'll pick up right where we left off yesterday. So we get all this stuff about what Cyrus is going to do and how God is going to use him. And then it pivots in chapter 46 for how Cyrus is going to be used to judge Babylon. That goes like this. Bel bows down, Nebo stoops low. Their idols are borne by beasts of burden. The images that are carried about are burdensome, a burden for the weary. They stoop down and bow down together, unable to rescue the burden. They themselves go off into captivity. And this goes on for a couple of chapters. Here's a sample of some of the most graphic language describing this judgment of Babylon. Go down, 47 verse 1. Sit in the dust, virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, daughter of the Babylonians. No more will you be called tender or delicate. Take millstones and grind flour. Take off your veil. Lift up your skirts. Bare your legs and wade through the streams. Your nakedness will be exposed and your shame uncovered. I will take vengeance. I will spare no one. And that language gives us a taste of later language in the Bible where Babylon becomes this metaphor. Like if you want to plug your kids' ears so you don't have to answer a question about what the oldest profession is, you can do that now. 3, 2, 1. Being likened to a whore, this language of the whore of Babylon, who is emblematic of all of the evil of all of the nations ever, is something that is developed in 1 Peter and then really developed in the book of Revelation. And one of the two big ultimate victories of God, one being over Satan himself, but the other of the two great big victories that cap off God's victory over evil and sin and destruction and everything is over this metaphorical whore that is Babylon. It's harsh language, but it's Bible language. And then after that language about how God's going to use Cyrus to judge Babylon, then in chapter 48 of Isaiah, we get a prediction about what Cyrus is going to do in letting the Jews return and rebuild. Verse 20 of chapter 48, leave Babylon, flee from the Babylonians, announce this with shouts of joy and proclaim it. Send it out to the ends of the earth. Say, the Lord has redeemed his servant Jacob. They did not thirst when he led them through the deserts. He made water flow for them from the rock. He split the rock and water gushed out. There is no peace, says the Lord, for the wicked. So wrapped up together here in this passage is the appointment of Cyrus, who doesn't even acknowledge God, but is being used by God, the judgment of the political entity that is Babylon, finally, for the calamity they unleashed against Jerusalem. But then the next part of the prophecy is that Cyrus is going to take this little glimmer of hope and grow it into full-fledged hope as he lets the Jews go back and begin to rebuild. And then right after that, as we get into chapter 49 and on to the end of the book of Isaiah, we start getting a whole bunch of Messiah language. So this is very powerful imagery. And all of this stuff we've been talking about historically, again, is so important for understanding what's going on with the Old Testament prophets and the Old Testament narrative, because these things really matter in the grand redemptive plan, not just as fun, juicy history or something to help us understand just one book of the Bible better. I also think it's really important to note that in that last little bit we were reading, the prophet Isaiah is likening the liberation from Babylon at the hands of Cyrus the Great to the liberation from Egypt at the deliverance of God. There's that reference about water flowing from the rock, and it's meant to remind them that God was with them even in those difficult times. And remember, that is one of the key themes of the book of Esther. Even when it seems like God is not advancing his redemptive plan, even when it seems like God is not there, God does not hear, he is doing those things. He does hear. And all the way back to what we were talking about yesterday and everything we've been talking about with the overlap between the Bible and the larger historical crazy period that we're looking at here, I very personally find that overlap to be hugely enlightening and encouraging and invigorating to explore. It makes some of the more boringer parts of the Old Testament that often you kind of gloss over, like the minor prophets and the major prophets that we've been in. It makes those things pop. It makes them come to life as we better understand the historical backdrop against which all of that is set. So this Cyrus guy is a big deal. The conquest of Babylon in 539 is a big deal. And what Cyrus does next in letting the Jews go back and rebuild is a big deal. And according to the Bible, God is in it. It seemed to me like it was worth taking a minute to go jump around the Old Testament and see how all that fits together a little bit better. Back to our blitz through Persian history to catch up with Esther next time around. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.